Welcome to Fairy Tale Access, where the head fairy's quest is to prove that fairy tales do exist in actual time rather than once upon a time. Together, we will unravel the heroes, young and old, who turn dreams into reality. These are the people who still believe in happily ever after. The discoveries will bend even our most cynical non-believers into believing in fairy tales. Hi, welcome to Fairy Tale Access. Today, I'm really excited to introduce you to the author of the Ashen Levels, C.F. Wilburn. And his first name is really Craig. Hi, Craig. Thanks for joining us. How are you today?
Hi, Denise. Thanks for having me. Yeah, I'm fine, thank you. I'm speaking to you from Spain, so it's pretty hot over here at the moment.
Ooh, it's pretty hot in New Hampshire, too. So tell me a little bit about your background. And, well, this looks like a really large book. It was really 5 books to begin with. Is that correct?
That's correct. Yeah, it was always intended to be one book, but I published it in 5 parts to try to drum up a little bit of interest, a bit of momentum. But then, yeah, the idea was always that it was one continuous story. Mm-hmm. But until it was published in one book, I wasn't quite sure how hefty it was going to be. It's pretty substantial.
It is pretty substantial. It took about a week, but it was an awesome journey to follow. So how did you create this world and the dynamics that went through it?
Well, the idea started off as a short story, believe it or not. And it was going to be a very simple idea about a campfire that overheard the stories of the different travellers who came and sat by the side of the campfire. But it just so happened that the first traveller that arrived was Balaguer, who turned out to be the protagonist, and I decided to follow his journey, and it really just sparked from a tiny idea like that. And the first draft was kind of unplanned, so I was kind of enjoying the journey, finding out about the world at the same time as the protagonist was, so it's kind of quite good fun to write.
Wow. What is your background in? How did you come up with the storyline and the places and the characters? There are a lot of characters on every level.
Yeah, I've heard that. Well, I wanted quite a diverse cast because obviously he travels, meeting lots of people through lots of different parts of the world. As I say, the idea of the story originated from a simple idea, but then I had to come up with a bit more depth. So I'm quite inspired by, particularly in this novel anyway, I'm inspired by video games. So I decided to use kind of video game mechanics as a way of a magic system. So the characters would be driven by a kind of addiction to the smoke, which they would collect and use to gain more power, which would enable them to survive and to be able to travel to new places. So yeah, it's very much inspired from video games.
Wow. Can you explain gaming mechanics?
Well, yeah, I mean, the book's kind of quite subtle, I think. There's a genre with lit RPG where it's very much based as if the book is a game. And I didn't really want to write like that. I wanted the book to be a real book, a real story, but with this kind of hidden thing going on in the background. So typical examples could be how they gather the smoke and they level up. In a computer game, maybe that would be getting experience by doing quests. And there's many other little elements to it, like the fast travel element and the safety of the fire, of the hubs, where they're kind of protected from the outside world. So, yeah, as I say, that idea was secondary and it sort of then became the structure. But anyone who plays games would know that they play them for enjoyment, and probably realise that the Ashen weren't really always enjoying what they were doing. So I had to kind of give them a reason to carry on. So there had to be rules and regulations set in place, and they were driven by a kind of addiction in the end. So it's kind of a little bit of a dark spin.
Yeah, no, it was really dynamic. I loved the ending. Like, seriously.
Oh, thanks.
Loved the ending. So
I'm pleased.
it was really good. It takes a while to read, though. It took about a week.
Yeah, it'd probably take me longer because I'm not really a fast reader either. I try to read a book a week at the moment, but they're not quite that big.
Well, this one was over 700 pages, so it took a little longer.
Yeah, well, as you mentioned, it was split into 5 parts, but I did write all of the 5 parts continuously. So I didn't release the first part until it was all done, because in fact, some of my best ideas in the book didn't even occur to me until I was nearly finished the first draft. And then I had to go back. And the second and the third draft were a little bit tying up all of the loose ends, making sure it all made sense. So I didn't really want to paint myself into a corner by releasing the first bit and then thinking of a really cool idea later on. And then it was too late to go back and do anything about it.
Wow. Are you a teacher in Spain?
Yes. I would like to say in my spare time I'm a teacher, but it's the other way around. In my spare time I'm a writer. I teach English and art, and I teach to 6th graders. So I've got my hands full because they're 11 and 12-year-olds.
Definitely.
That's a bit crazy at times. But luckily at the moment I'm on the summer holidays, so I'm taking advantage of these 10 weeks and really trying to knuckle down and do some more writing again.
Oh, great. What's on the agenda next?
I'm actually going back to writing a book which I started before the Ashen Levels, and for one reason or another it got put on the back burner, and I didn't forget about it, but I was occupied with other things. So I've gone back and looked at it, and I realised it wasn't as good as I thought it was at the time. But I did take away some characters, some settings, a few ideas, and all of the good things. And then I've created an entirely new story using some stuff I already had. But it's very different from the Ashen Levels. It's nothing related to gaming. It's more traditional fantasy, and it's going to be set across various point of view characters. So it's an interesting challenge because one of the characters is going to be the antagonist, and it's kind of be nice to write from that point of view, because the thing with the Ashen Levels was it was very narrow on Balaguer's point of view, which made for more suspense and mystery. You didn't know what was happening until he found out, whereas this is from multiple angles, so you're going to know kind of what the bad guy's thinking as well. So it's different project and quite exciting.
It was. I love all the different characters, like the succubus and all these other characters that you brought into play. It was really great how we went up the levels and, how to confront these different mythological creatures.
Yeah, there's quite a strange mix of scenarios going on, and it became almost a challenge to myself to keep trying to beat myself, because around each corner you never knew what Balaguer was going to encounter, and then I would come up with an idea and think, that's quite good, but how can I make the next scene not an anticlimax, keep getting more crazy or weird? So particularly part 2, where it's set on the ship, that was kind of like my ode to Homer's Odyssey, because with each island, each chapter was basically a different island, and with each island it gave me a lot of opportunities to think, what's going to happen here? And I love just trying to use my imagination and make it fresh, really.
Well, working with 6th graders will definitely help you keep it fresh. It was great.
Yeah.
I really liked the interactions, but I loved the ending. I love the way it all led up to the ending. It totally played out well.
Yeah, I'm pleased to hear that, because I know a lot of people, as they're reading through it, it feels like it's quite a long book, and it feels sometimes there's a lot of random things happening. So they might think, where's this actually going? But by the end, it all ties in together, and even those very small ideas that you think aren't important all come back and actually are significant in the end. So I'm happy you made it to the end, because that's where you get the payoff, kind of, so to speak.
It's definitely the payoff. It actually mirrors, like people in life going through that journey. And, once you've climbed several hurdles, there's that place you want to go back to.
That's true, yeah. And obviously, he's not only exploring and learning about the world, but also about himself. So it's a little bit of a journey about self-discovery. And it seems very isolated at the beginning, but then he becomes this kind of personality that attracts other people around him. And not all of them are good people, but yeah, I think in the end he's got that dynamic that bands people together and makes them work as a team almost.
So do you travel yourself a lot?
I have travelled a lot, but at the moment not so much. Yeah, I spent quite a few years travelling, and hence I ended up living in Spain, because I spent a year in South America learning Spanish, and I loved it, but it was a little bit far away from England. So I thought, well, Spain's only 2 hours away. It's better weather here, so that's why I decided to get away from all the rain, really.
Does it rain a lot in England?
Pretty much, yeah. I just went back to see my parents a couple of weeks ago, and I was amazed how green everything was. It was like going to the Shire from, the Lord of the Rings kind of thing. It was very nice, but I think a week there is enough, and then I like to get back here. But yeah, I think definitely traveling is inspirational, and a lot of ideas come from traveling. I don't really want to give away any spoilers, but there's a section in the book where they go to a place called the Vale Lands, and it's like a wine country, I suppose you could say. And that was definitely inspired by an area of Spain called La Rioja, where I went a couple of years ago, and the scenery, the landscape, definitely stuck in my mind. So when I was writing that part of the book, that was definitely what I was imagining.
Oh, wow. What is that place like?
Oh, it's very nice. Good wine. Spain, obviously, in the south is very hot, but this is towards the north, so it's very nice and green. Yeah, I'd probably compare it to the south of France because it's north of Spain. But yeah, I don't know. I just enjoyed it there, and there's a lot of history, and the landscape just stuck in my mind when I was writing that part of the world. Ithinar, which is the world the Ashen Levels takes place in.
Wow. And how long did it take you to write the Ashen Levels altogether?
Altogether, 2 years. The first year was the first draft. As I say, I wrote the whole thing through in one go. And yeah, that was about 12 months. And then it took me another 12 months to go through it twice more, just tying everything together, going back, dotting the I's, crossing the T's, and then obviously getting it edited and all of that kind of stuff, getting the cover sorted. Yeah, so it's a fairly big project, but it didn't feel big at the time, just looking back.
Oh, that's great. You must be a great storyteller in school, too.
Well, I am trying to do some creative writing with the kids, so it's kind of nice. They've got some really interesting imaginations as well. So yeah, we try and do a bit of reading and writing. So because these days they're more interested in using the iPad, but it's nice to go back to pen and paper and just get them using their imaginations again. So yeah, some of them got some crazy imaginations, really.
Oh, that's good.
I suppose I did as well when I was their age, but I can't remember now.
Well, what was your favorite book growing up?
Well, yeah, probably when I was their age, I was reading The Hobbit. Before that, the Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe. And then I started getting into other authors like Tad Williams, was a really big favourite of mine, and lots of other fantasy stuff, Raymond E. Feist and David Eddings. Actually, though, I did take a break from fantasy because I went to university and studied literature, and then I ended up reading a lot of classics, all the Jane Austens and things like that. And I also got really into my magical realism, so I really enjoy things like Isabel Allende's House of Spirits. And then it wasn't until afterwards I came back to the fantasy genre, but I came back in a big way. I decided to go back and read lots of classics that I didn't know about. And I actually discovered probably my favourite author then, which I would probably say is Jack Vance. I hadn't read anything by him, and then within 2 years, I think I read like 10 of his books, and I love it. It's great.
Wow. The way that you did the interactions between people, like I love the justice of some of the levels, where somebody tried to entrap him, but I love the way it plays out, and that was really good.
That's it, yeah.
Little
Yeah,
vengeance
exactly. You never
hurts.
really know. No, exactly. Yeah, always try to be slyer than the other people, I suppose. But yeah, I guess that there was comeuppance, there was rules. So Peligir normally got his own back, not always. But there were certain rules in place as well where they couldn't sort of fight each other, I suppose, because in the hubs, which are the actual fires, as I mentioned earlier, these are the safe zones. So if an Ashen is in the safe area, nobody from the outside world can reach them. Similarly, if they are both in there, they can't do harm to each other. So there were some quite interesting situations where two enemies might find themselves together at the same fire, but until they leave the fire circle, they can't act on it. So it's quite interesting for them to interact in this safe. It was like a timeout zone where they still had these grudges, but they couldn't like draw swords or anything like that.
Yeah, but how did you put it together? Did you make the rules first and you wrote by the rules?
The rules kind of came as I was going along because I had to think, how can this all make sense? Why are they doing what they're doing? Why can't they just break the rules and do this? So it had to have, every time I kind of stumbled over a loophole and thought, well, that couldn't happen because of this, then I had to go back and think of the layers underneath. And towards the end, I think Peligir, well, everything kind of becomes clear to him. But for a long time, it's trial and error. And as I say, as a writer, I was kind of discovering it along with him. Very early on, I think in the 3rd chapter, he discovers one of the consequences of not keeping an oath. So whenever you receive an oath, you have like a glowing orb on your belt, which is, I guess it's the equivalent of when you're playing a game. If you go to the pause menu, you can see what quests you have pending. Well, I couldn't obviously do that in a fantasy world, so the belt became an idea of keeping track of what you had to do. So anyway, once you have one of these oaths, there's no way of getting out of it, apart from maybe tricking someone else into doing it if it's too dangerous, or getting someone to help you, in which case you would share the reward of the smoke, which the quest or oath is worth.
Wow. So what's life like in Spain? I just want to find out what influences you.
Oh, I love it here. At the moment, it's very, very hot, but I'm not complaining because, as I say, I grew up with a lot of rain and I love the sun. The food is great, the people are great, and it's such a big country, really diverse. So most people have in their mind what the south of Spain is like, probably very golden and dry, but the north of Spain is like mountainous and green. So you've really got a little bit of everything here. It's very, very nice. And I am a very big beach person. I love the beach. But somehow I chose to live in Madrid, which is right in the middle. the furthest away you can get from the coast. So I'm not quite sure. I met my wife here, so that's why I've ended up staying here. But the good thing about being in the centre is you can decide when you go on holiday, do you head north, south, east or west? You kind of have 4 options open to you.
Nice. What are some famous landmarks around the area that you visit that have given you inspiration for this book?
Well, as I say earlier, I suppose when I went to La Rioja, the wine region in Spain, that was definitely an inspiration for the Vale lands. With regards to the rest, the wilds, which is the first area of the book, that was probably inspired from when I was in England, because it's very dim, not much light. The trees are all gnarled, and the moss, the rocks are all old and covered with moss. And I don't think you really get that too much in central Spain. But yeah, some of the old woods and the fields where I used to play growing up, I imagine that's where the darker, more green and earthy fantasy came from.
Wow. Well, it's a really intense read with a lot of surprises along the way and satisfaction of the way things work out. And then the ending, I think most people would get it right away. It totally blew me away that it was such a good ending. Like, it's so different than regular fantasy novel endings. So I really liked it.
Yeah, I mean, the ending definitely ties everything together, and it really is the end of the story. But I'm not ever ruling out going back to the Ashen world again in the future. I have a few ideas bubbling away already, and I actually miss the characters a little bit now. So I'm enjoying my new book that I'm writing. It's nice, but I still have some unfinished business, I think, in Ithianar. So watch your space.
Wow. So what's the name of the next book that's coming up? Do you have it yet?
Oh, at the moment, there's not really a title. In fact, the Ashen Levels, the title came quite late on as well, because I changed my mind so many times. The original title for the short story was just Campfire, and then the Ashen were originally called Wanderers or Travellers. So the titles, I either think of the title straight away, and that gives me sort of a push, or the title will be one of the very last things that I think of after rejecting lots of ideas. And in the case of the new book, I've thought of a few things, but nothing's really settled. Nothing's really struck me yet.
How much longer will the next one take?
I'm hoping to get it out late next year, but I think it will be 2 books. So I'm aiming for autumn or fall, as you say in America, fall next year, and then the second part in spring the year after, because the book is tied to the seasons.
Oh.
So I'm hoping it's going to start in autumn and winter. So I would really love to release that part of the book at that time of year. And then the second part will be spring and summer. So I would love to get that out sort of March the following year, if possible. So it ties in.
That sounds really interesting. I can't wait to see it. And what kind of advice would you give to other writers?
I guess enjoy what you're doing, because if you're having fun, if you're enjoying what you're writing, then the chances are somebody who's reading it will probably enjoy something about it too. That's probably the best advice I could ever give. Good posture as well, because sitting in the same chair for a while, if you're not sitting properly, could get quite uncomfortable. But no, really just enjoy yourself. And I've heard lots of advice: read widely, travel, and if I get stuck for an idea or I get kind of confused about something, I'll just go for a nice walk, and that really helps organise my thoughts. But yeah, just have fun.
That's great advice at any age, even if they're just writing for fun.
Exactly.
Well,
Sorry, the camera's gone a bit strange now.
Well, thank you so much for your time today and telling us
Oh, thanks for having me,
background.
Denise, and thanks for reading the book, because I know it's not a small book and it takes quite a lot of work to get through it all.
It does, but it's totally worth it. I really enjoyed it. Everything about it. And I love the ending. Seriously love the ending. So,
Thanks. It means a lot to hear that.
oh, good. I'm sure it means a lot to some other people you know too. But I don't want to give it
Yeah.
away.
Okay. Yeah, I guess a few friends have read it, but not many of my friends have made it all of the way through yet. Yeah, they're not. The most of the people I know who write fantasy, who read fantasy, are people that I've met online through groups. Out of my real life friends, a few people enjoy fantasy, but maybe they're more like reading science fiction, or they don't have time to read, or they prefer different types of things. So yeah, I've only got a few friends who've actually read it. So
Well, I think reading gives you a different perspective. And when I got it, I was like, but then I took it as a challenge. And after the first chapter, I really didn't want to stop. It was hard to put down.
oh, good. Well, you can always use it as like a doorstop or a blunt weapon. It really is that big.
Yeah, I think I'll probably read it again, though. I really enjoyed it.
Oh, oh, thanks so much for that. Yeah, the guy who did the cover, the artwork, is actually a friend of mine, and I was really lucky because he read it before it was ready, and that's why he was able to work very closely with me on the covers, and
Totally
yeah,
fits.
yeah. So and it's quite abstract compared to a lot of fantasy covers, but I think I'm really pleased with it, and he did a good job.
Definitely. It definitely goes with the story. Thank you again.
Yep, thanks very much.
Oh, my pleasure. Until next time, keep asking questions. And if you want a really good book to read, this is it. Especially if you're going on a long trip and you know you're going to finish a shorter novel, this one's perfect. It'll keep you entertained. See you soon.